Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Bava Metzia daf Ayin Ches. We're going to begin on Ayin Ches Amud Aleph at the very top line. So the Gemara says, Pshita, the following is simple, that boilas vune b'meya, if let's say he wishes to be involved in a business transaction for his field for 100 zuz, well ashkach, and he does not find, v'zavin b'masayim, instead he ended up selling a bigger field for 200, but ka'ayel v'nafik azuze lo kani, and he's trying to go get his money. In that case, it's not a kinyan. Says Rashi, he really needed 100 zuz, and so he had a field which was kind of small, was worth 100 zuz, and he was hoping to sell that to get his money. There was no one to buy this field which was worth 100. Therefore, he had no choice but umacha gadol b'masayim. He had to collect 200 by selling a larger field. And then you see that he is constantly going back and forth, asking money, when's my money coming, etc., which means he really wanted to be completely paid up front. Lo kani, in that situation, the lokech is not koinet. El-i boy lasvuni b'meya. Let's say he wanted to sell it for 100. V'lashkach, he didn't find. However, tarach, but if he troubled himself to find a buyer, mashkach, he could have found one. It may have taken a little bit of time, but he could have done it. V'loy tarach, but he decided not to trouble himself. V'zavan masayim, and he sold his bigger field. V'ka'ayav anafik azuzi mai. What's it din? K'moicher sedei mipnei ra'asa dami olo teku. As we saw in yesterday's daf, that sometimes when the person is running after a person, it doesn't necessarily mean that therefore he doesn't want to be koine. It just may mean because he's concerned that this lekech is going to change his mind because of an inferior property, and therefore that's why he's doing it. So therefore, in this situation, the fact that he could have been matriach himself to find someone, but he didn't. So why didn't he? Maybe it shows that there was something wrong in his mind, or maybe in reality, of this field, and therefore for that reason, maybe it would not constitute a reason for it not to be a kinyan for the lekech. Teku. So he said that you could hire them or you could trick them. So ad kama seicher alehen. So Rav Nachman ad kidei sacharan, up until their wages. Esvi Rabbi Rav Nachman asked a question. Ad arbaim v'chamishim zuz. It says up until 40 and 50 zuz, which is a lot more. So Amalei kitanyehi shabasa chavil yadai. Basically, what happened was they left their tools there. So since they left their tools there, he could use this as part of their costs and use them as part of the expenses. Says Rashi, Im yesh biyada mishalahen harbe kederech ha'umanim hamakabim lehem malacha mavim klei umnois lubeis bal habayis. Okay, let's see the next Mishnah. Says the Mastisa, hasoiches achamor. Let's say you rent out a donkey, but it was very clearly stipulated you're renting a car, and it's a haylicha bahar. It's your purpose, as you said, is to go up a mountain. Instead, b'halicha b'bika, you took the animal and you used it for a totally different purpose, to traverse in a valley, or for that matter, b'bika b'halicha bahar afilu zu eser milin v'zu eser milin u'meisachayev. It doesn't make any difference if you ended up going the same amount of miles, same amount of kilometers. The reality is, since you did not do as you stipulated you were going to do, you took the animal to a different location, therefore you're going to be chayav. That's the ratio. And now the Sefer says like this: so you rent out a donkey, so it's going on the mountain, and instead again you brought it to the valley. Now, we should say, push it, you're going to be chayav if it dies. But instead, we make this whole distinction. It depends. If, let's say, while the animal was in a bika, it slipped, so then you're going to be potter, because the whole deal was you're supposed to bring it into on a mountainous range, and in a mountainous range, as Rashi says, it's chanim shupal estadim. It's very steep, obviously. A much greater likelihood you're going to slip on a mountain than on a straight path. So if the animal did slip, and that's how it died, so you're going to be potter because the arrangement was it to be on a mountain, which would be a much greater likelihood it was going to slip. V'im huchama chayev. However, if it died due to overheating, then you're chayev. Why? Shabika malahevel, because a valley has foul smell. Why? Lafi she'aharim seviva ve'in aver shoyotba, because you have all these big mountains all around it, so there's no air circulation. So therefore, you're supposed to put the animal by a mountain. In a mountain, there's beautiful air because it's all open. And therefore, the fact that instead you brought the animal to a valley, therefore you're going to be chayiv if it dies due to overheating. For that matter, if let's say you were supposed to keep it in the bika and instead you brought it to a mountain, so if it slipped, you're chayiv because again you brought it to a mountain where it's more likely to slip. If it died of overheat on a mountain, it would have died anyway, probably in the bika because it's of the foul order. If the reason why it died was because it was going uphill, it was climbing up the hill, then you're chayiv. So rent out a donkey, vihiv rika o shenasis angaria. Now the first case of Evrika, the Gemara is going to explain, but shenasis angaria, Rashi says, shenatul avodas hamelach, that was taken over by the king. King grabbed this rental. So you had a donkey, and all of a sudden, a king with this huge army grabs this donkey away. So you can say the owner does not need. In this case, it means the owner does not have to replace the donkey. It's important. Rashi. So your mazel caused it. So I'm not giving you another rental car. However, Mesa, let's say the animal died, or Nishra, or the animal broke its leg, Chayev, the maskir, the owner must replace it. To give him another donkey. Okay, says the Gemara. Mashna Reisha, Doloi Kamaflig, Mashna save the Kamaflig. The Reisha of our Mishnah says, apparently, no matter what, since you brought the animal not to the right place, a mountain instead of a valley, or a valley instead of a mountain, you're always chayev. However, the Seifa says it's not true. So I'm going to Rav Yanai, there's 4 answers. This is going to be question 6. But my So how does the Reisha not make this distinction? So Reisha shmeisa machmas avir. The animal died because of avir, air, which really means it was a natural death. Says Rashi, it didn't die because it slipped. It didn't die because of overheating. It just died on its own, says the Reisha. Since it was different, you could say, it died just like as naturally. In other words, it could be because the animal was used to being in a mountain, and then you put it in a valley, therefore it died of natural causes, and that's the reason why you're chayiv. The Amrina, back in the Gemara, Avir the har katla, the Amrina Avir the bika katla. It died because of the air it wasn't used to, and it died this natural death. Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina Omer, second answer, maybe it died, says Rashi, ayafois v'yagia, because of the hard work and its exhaustion, and therefore you're always chayiv, as you deviated from what the norm was. Rabbi Omer, third answer, shekisha nachash. Maybe it's a case where a snake bit the animal. So even though it's an oinus, but since you went away from where you're supposed to do your chayiv. Rav Chia bar Rabba Omer Rav Yochanan Hamani Rabbi Yair he the Omer kol maver al das shel baal bayis. Anyone who goes against the way of the baal bayis, nikra gazlan. You're called a gazlan, and therefore that's what you are in this circumstance, because you were supposed to bring the animal by a mountain, instead you brought to a valley, or vice versa. So therefore, since you're a maver al das baal bayis, you're considered to be a gazlan. And on this, as we continue, Ayin Chesed Beis, Rashi says, therefore, that's why you're chayiv in all the oinsim, even though it was an oinus that it died that way. So, hi Rameir. Which Rameir is it that says this din, that if you go against the ways of the Baal Bayis, that you're a gazlan? So the Gemara says like this: Rameir The tzava, as we mentioned even in yesterday's daf, mentioned so many times. The 9, it says in Bava Kama, Hanais and Semot tzava. You give wool to a dyer, let's boil edoim, and the intention was for him to dye your wool red. But instead of a shachar, or a shachar, you wanted it black, but some adam, and they dyed it red, so they went against the das of the Baal bias. What you have to do is you have to pay the value of the wool, because Rameir holds that he was kinda this wool through a shini maisa. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer im hashvach yaiser al yitzia nois lo yitzia. If the increase in value of the dyed wool is greater than the expenditures, then nois lo yitzia. The im hayitzia is al shvach. If his work price is more than the improvements, nois lo shvach. In other words, he holds you always give them the lower of the two, as we saw before in yesterday's daf. Because since you went against what you're supposed to do, then yad al tachtaina, you have the lower hand. So this is a raya. Right? This is not necessarily so. But my dilma shani hasam, maybe it's different when it comes to this case. The kind of a shini ma'isa, because as I said, there's a shini ma'isa. That's the reason why that's what he says. Question TA4. Hechem sinu rameir no marvel das daita shel malbayis nikr gazlan. So we'll see what the first part of the answer to this question is. The second is, you can't learn out from the tzemer, the hasim kind of b'shini ma'isa, as we said. Okay, so that's TA4. We're still trying to find where we find that Rameir says this din. Where do we see this? Elo ha Rameir, dim migbas purim. When it comes to collection of money on Purim. What's that? The Sanya. Migbas Purim or Purim. When you collect money for Purim, that money is supposed to go to the poor people in the city for the students' Purim. That's what it's all supposed to be given to. Migbas Se'ir lo Se'ir. When you collect money for a city, that money should go entirely to that city. Ve'ein medaktikin badavar. But we're not so medaktik in this. Of a leichenes ha'golim, you can purchase calves, b'shaychatin eat in shechtem v'oichanaisan, v'hamaiser. When it comes to whatever leftover money is after they've been fed, so the din is, as long as again everything was done, so yipol kishol sadaka. So everything else can go to the sadaka. Says Rashi, v'hamaiser shol yaspiku lechoil b'purim yimchor v'yipoil l'kishol sadaka. Rabbi Lezer Omer Migwas Purim Purim. Again, the collection of monies for Purim have to go again to the poor people for Purim itself. He's not allowed to be by his shoelace for his shoe. Unless it was already stipulated in the presence of the Anshe Ir that this was allowed. Now we see this is the words of Rameir, so this is a raya. Now, when it comes to Migmas Purim, you have to give it for the people who are poor on Purim and nothing else, and you cannot deviate from it. So that's going to be the proof. Rav Shmuel Mekel, Rav Shmuel is lenient. Okay, so Dilmash Hasam Nami Daita the Purim Hu Yoivle, Daita the Minachmina Lo Yoivle. No, the reason why is just push it. Your intention was to give it for Purim. That's why you gave out this matanos of yoinim, and all of a sudden it's being used for something else. That's the problem. So it's not a raya. That again, any person who deviates from this person is nikra gazlan. El haramer, the sign. Rav Shimon ben Lezer Omer Rav Shimon Ramer. He said the name Ramer Hanaisen din ani, this is going to be the maskana. Person who gives money to a poor person, likach l'cholok, and his intention was for him to buy a shirt. So then is likach l'talis. He shouldn't buy a talis with it, or for that matter, talis likach l'cholok. Not allowed to do it. Why? Because he's going against the words of what the Baal said. Now again, maybe the problem is because we may end up coming to suspect the owner, says Rashi, that he promised that he was going to give him something and ends up not giving it. But the truth is he did give it, but it was just bought, something else was bought. Yamri Inchi, Omer Planya Zavnina Le Lavusha Le Planyania. This guy said he was going to buy clothes for this poor guy. He just never bought it. But the truth is, he really did give him the money for it, but he misappropriated those funds. Inami, alternatively, Zavnina Le Glima may have sold this garment, but he actually, it wasn't sold. So Im Kain listing him Hachshad. It should say the language, the issues of Chashad are causing suspecting of a person. Because it was Shani who changed it. So Taka, you see the fact, you could have other reasons. It could have been because of Chashad, but then it wouldn't have said that. It would have said Minei Chashad. That's not what it says. It says clearly because he deviated from what he was supposed to do, and therefore Maskana. This is how we want it from our mayor. If you give money to a dinner to a poor person to buy a shirt, he should not buy a talus because he was Mavrel Daita Shabal Habayas. Okay. All right, let's continue. Good. 2 dots. Hasayches achamar v'hivrika. Gemara didn't. Rashi said over there, we're going to explain it, so we're going to explain it now. My v'hivrika, what happened? So halchatar gimu nahorisa. What does that mean? So Rashi says, hayotzes b'shchar ayin. It went out the blackness of its eye. So something happened to its eye. So that's what ended up happening. So again, we're talking, you rent out a donkey, then something happened to its eyes, which obviously affects the animal. Or, as we're going to see, the Angaria, that the king and his army took it away. Okay. Rava Omer Avzekes. Actually, what happened was that worms ate the animal's legs. Says Rashi, Hatoloyim hitliu ragleho, that the worms went onto its legs. Hahudi yarmeluhu Avzekes b'milta demalka. There was someone who said Avzekes is silks for the king. Says Rashi, Re'isi asha oichel shiyiraim shel yoitzer melach. So Amrule b'mai, which clothes? So bitli kesav, bitlei kesav or bitlei zahav. Says Rashi, kli pishtan is kesav, is like flax. Zahav is kli tsemer, is considered wool, and it's dyed red. So igid amri bitli kesav. Amr b'katluha. Igid amri bitli dahav oimer b'shavkuha. Okay. So someone said that it's considered to be bitli kesef. Says Rashi, kli pishtan, and bitli zahav, says dahav, kli tsemeret sevuyin adai, bekatua she'in ash oichel kli pishtan. Okay. Oshanasas angaryam lo hashavanecha. So the masker can say, listen, I'm not going to give you a new animal. Omarav lo shanu el bangaria chayzeres. The only time we say that is if the animal, the tax, or this king will return the object eventually to the masker. So the masker will get it back and get some use of it at the end. So he doesn't need to give him a new rental, and he could say harsh l'fnecha. If he takes it and never gives it back, then then you actually do have to provide the soicher with a new donkey. Shmuel Eimer, no, whether or not this money will end up coming back or not, it depends. If he was traveling on the same route anyway, so this animal everything was fine, it was going on the same route, this was going to happen no matter what, so then the master can say, however, if he didn't go on that route, then in fact you do have to provide another donkey. You rent out a donkey, and we said it was like blinded, Oshinish Tata, it got crazy. Mesa Oshinasis and Garia, it says Beferish, if let's say it dies or it's taken away by kings, so he says you have to replace this donkey with a new donkey. Now Pishlam Rav Lo Kasha, Rav can answer his Pashit. He can just say Kan ben Garia Choseres, Kan ben Garia Sheno Choseres. He says that there's a time in which if this will end up being returned or not being returned, we'll be able to explain the difference between whether or not you can say that you're going to be chayiv to provide another one or not. El Shmuel Kasha. According to Shmuel, he says it doesn't make any difference. Whether it's an angaria, the money, or this thing that was taken away will be returned or not, you're always, he says, you're chayiv anyway. El Shmuel Kasha. V'chita Shmuel Namel Kasha. Kan sheder chali chasa nitla, kan shlo b'derech chali chasa nitla. It was taken shloi b'derech nehila, not in the proper way. Says Rashi, im b'derech chali chasa nitla, bangari mali chasa l'derech shahaisa zeroitzel halach. It was like going in the proper way. So ham in a tiny sefer, Rabbi Shimon Lezo Aimer, im b'derech chali chasa nitla Rabbi Shimon. That if it was going in the proper way, then you can just say, listen, this was gonna happen anyway. So that's what he says, which is mashma the Reisha can't make that distinction as well. Tanakama was shanui, doesn't make a distinction. So Amach Shmuel lav miiko Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar koi kavasi the koi kavasi adinam Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. You're right. According to me, that's problematic, but there is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar over here that says beferish that im b'derech lichasa nitla oimro shavanacha. Fine. Okay. Aboy Sema Kol Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Really, this whole thing is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar because Rabbi Hakatani is just words missing. If you were renting a donkey and got blind or became crazy, so he can say however, if let's say the king took it away, so then you would have to return him another donkey to this renter. So that's if it was taken not in the proper way. If it was snatched at the same place where you would have gone anyway, so then the Yutaka can say as we continue Ayin Testament Aleph. That's Divi Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Shahayu Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. If again it was taken while you were traveling, but if not, then chamor. I mean, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, can you really say that this opinion is like him? But Katani Reisha, what does it say in the Reisha? If you rent out a donkey, so you can say Harshal Vanacha. According to him, if it's to ride it, and then something happens to it, it goes crazy, you do have to replace another animal. So how could you tell me that you don't have to replace it? Says before you do. So to ride on is different. What does that mean? So says Rashi, Lirchav Shani, says Rashi in the top line, Shema Tipo Tachtav Begesher, maybe her husband will be young and she'll be older, and let's say Shema Tipo Tachtav Begesher or Tashlichenu B'achas Absochem. So we need to give it's got a new chamor in that case. Okay, let's look at a couple questions. We're going to stop. Nothing on question 8. Oh, actually, let's look at question 7. When can the masker say, I don't have to give you another donkey, according to all opinions? So if it's Angaria Chazeres, if the animal is going to be returned, so then you can say Hashavanecha, or Benitlu B'derech Chalichasa, if it was snatched in the normal way of where it was going in any direction. Question TB5. Hasaycher chamor bevriko nishtata. Ha'im omer harosh v'necha. So this is what I wrote. Im omer chamor zel oz yachal omer harosh v'necha. V'lo b'chamor stam. V'gam yeshavda im yachal liskar im mikali karna olo. So I'm not sure if that's what they're asking for over here. So it looks like the same question of when ha'im omer hamasker harosh v'necha. So he said normally not, but l'kuli alma, as we said, in the event where the animal will be replaced, the sangaria choseres or v'nitl b'derech alichasa, then the masker could say harosh v'necha ad kan.